Welcome to episode 1, True Crime, where we talk about the mysterious, the mystical, the murderous UK. Our first case study, Paul Glen. Not much information is known about Paul Glen as a youth. He was born in Fleetwood, Lancashire in 1979. Information about his parents or relatives are almost non-existent. I've come across a few of his friends and cellmates, but it seems like the days of secrecy have stayed true to the roadman of old. Something that would have no doubt been all over social media in today's climate. Some have said Paul was a big fella who could have had a large stake in the criminal underworld if it wasn't for his eagerness for cash that got him a life sentence only 16 years old. And on the 31st of February, Paul Glen would align himself with an unknown assailant. And that night, the two would go out looking to rob their target, Ivor Usher. Ivor was a homosexual man who would have frequent guest house parties in Blackpool, which was one of the leading gay-friendly times. Ivor lived in one of those guest houses, but on that night of February the 31st, his next guest would be uninvited.
Don't you even think about moving there? Where's the £5 my notes here?
Paul and his accomplice plotted to rob £5,000 as they believed that's the amount of cash that was in the safe. They broke through the door, which would later be something of a trademark for our man Paul. The pair tied up Ivor and demanded the £5,000. It's not clear what made Paul snap, but within seconds of tying him up and demanding the cash, Paul Glen lost his self-control and bludgeoned the gay bachelor to death with a bar stool and a wrench. Brutal. But Paul Glen wasn't done there. He then set the building alight and escaped with his accomplice. Nobody knows if the money was ever recovered, but to snap that fast and not even consider the money gives me vibes of someone who is proper tapped. That year, Glen was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. Shockingly, he'd only served 13 years of that sentence. It was said he was quiet but explosive in jail. He'd get into fights and lay people out all over the deck. It was said by one of his friends at the time that he came out of jail after that 13-year stretch and somewhat seemed a bit childish. Got back into the streets, doing jobs within months, having brawls with doormen at clubs. He must have calmed down for a period as he met a woman and had a child soon after his release in 2002 from his life sentence. At this time, he moved to Hatfield, Fleetwood in Northwest. We'll come back to Paul shortly. But now, let's take a look at millionaire Robert Lotz, who's got a big part to play in Paul's next steps. Now you're probably thinking, what's a millionaire got to do with all of this? Well, a couple years later in 2004, Robert Lotz, 45, was a Cambridgeshire millionaire, described as a legitimate businessman for the most part. He was in the middle of a long-standing feud that involved his 3 sons and a man who Lotz decided needed shaking up. Not killed by any means, but badly hurt enough that he'd leave those kids alone. And although Lotz wasn't used to hiring thugs to do his dirty work, he had connections who could help in this manner. His brother-in-law and business partner Wayne Wright, 45, and well-renowned underworld gangster Victor Dark, 48. Wright put him in touch with a murderer he knew, somebody who killed for money in the past, a criminal with no connection to the Cambridgeshire area, a man called Paul Glen. Paul Glen. A couple 100 miles away from Glen's home in Blackpool, Robert Bogle, a builder, was preparing his dinner at home in the kitchen in Farset, Cambridgeshire. It was Tuesday the 8th of June 2004, and as Roberts prepared a bolognese sauce for him and his girlfriend Angela Walker, the relative calm was broken by a man at the back door. Wearing a hooded top, overcoat and black gloves, the stranger kicked open the back door and entered the property, brandishing a 12-inch kitchen knife. He walked over to Robert and immediately started stabbing him. Despite a desperate attempt to defend himself, Robert soon succumbed to 10 stab wounds in his hands, arm, cheek and heart. Angela fled the living room in fear, throwing herself behind the sofa. Struggling to keep his balance and desperately fighting for his life, the 25-year-old victim made his way to the doorway in an attempt to get outside help. Leaving a trail of red handprints along the kitchen units, he managed to make it as far as the pavement outside. A group of teenage girls say they were walking along the street with a bag of chips at the very moment they were met by a frantic Robert who pleaded with them to call the ambulance. One of the girls immediately called 999 from their mobile as Robert lurched towards a nearby shop, banging on the windows before collapsing to the floor. As the 14-year-old was on the phone to the emergency services, others were desperately trying to stem the blood coming from the wounds. In and amongst the horrific scenes, the attacker calmly walked past, strolling down that alleyway that was adjacent to the house. When they were given evidence in court, one of the girls said,
I was really scared by a large man who wore black gloves. I thought, why wear gloves in warm weather?
Another said,
We thought it was all a joke at one point, because the other man just walked away like nothing had happened.
The police were quick to capture the murderer. Mobile phone records revealed that Paul Glen had been in Farset at the time of the killing and had immediately travelled to Blackpool afterwards. Delving deeper into Glen's mobile, police found that in the run-up to shortly to the murder, Glen had been speaking to local businessman Robert Lotz and his brother-in-law. They quickly established that Paul Glen had been hired to do the job to putting the frightenings on the target, Vincent Smart. And if you're wondering why we haven't heard that name yet, it's because Paul Glen cocked up.
Yeah, what do you mean I got the wrong man? What do you mean?
Glen was given the address where Vincent Smart was living. He managed to find the address, but he failed to do any sort of research into the man he was supposed to be scaring off, ignoring the fact that Glen didn't even come close to just frightening the target. Instead, he lashed out in a bloodthirsty slaying. And he also managed to get the wrong man. And if you're thinking that could easily be done, Robert Bogle was black. The target, Vincent Smart, was white. When he was pulled in for questioning, Glen was showing the evidence. Not only did the mobile phone data put him at the scene of the crime, but the forensic evidence, mainly a shred of Glen's skin under the fingernails of the murder victim. Glen wasn't having any of it. Although he knew he was banged to rights, he told police the murder had been committed by a man called Steve. Steve, it seems, has arranged to meet Glen and transact a cannabis deal and meet at the house. Glen agreed, later telling the jury that it seemed convenient. He went on to say,
I'm a sucker for a hard luck story. I don't like to hear people being subjected to violence or bullying. I plan to take some cannabis around as a peace offering. If I could reason with the guy, I'd sit down and reason with him. I was a peacemaker.
As the story continued, he revealed that while he was upstairs looking for Smart, the mysterious Steve attacked and killed Robert. Glen continued,
When I got down to the bottom of the stairs, I saw Steve going through a back door. He was trying to follow. I pulled him back. He fell down on the floor. He slipped. The blood was everywhere. I stepped back. I saw it all. And then he just shot out the door. I was all over in a matter of seconds. I was there, but I didn't stab him. I wasn't alone, and that's the truth.
But Glen's story was ripped apart by the prosecution at Norwich Crown Court, who pointed out there was only one set of footprints, and those footprints forensically belonged to Glen's size 10 Timberlands. The trial lasted 5 weeks, during which Bogle's girlfriend Angelina, who had witnessed the brutal attack, had been so traumatised by it she was unable to give evidence at court. At the end of the trial, Paul Glen was found guilty of murder. Judge John Blowfield declared it was unsafe to consider a release date for Glen, and he would never be freed. Gathering together with family and friends outside of the court sentencing was Robert's father, Linford, and he said,
It's been very difficult. My wife is only here in body. As spirit, if I disappear somewhere else, we'll never forget Robert.
Robert's older brother also commented,
He was a wonderful person. It's just a shame he's not here. There's nothing I can say or do, he's not coming back. They say time's a great healer. We'll just have to test that theory for ourselves.
Glen was also found guilty of conspiracy to commit GBH by the jury, with the judge ordering he served 9 years concurrently for it. He was sent to Whitehall prison. Victor Dark, the underworld gangster, was cleared of both charges. The millionaire Robert Lotz and his business partner Wayne Wright were cleared of murder and conspiracy to murder, but were guilty of causing GBH. Robert Lotz was sent for 4 years, and Wayne Wright went down for 5. In 2005, Paul Glen launched an appeal for his sentence to be reduced, but his claim was rejected on the basis that it wasn't only his second murder, but his second time killing for profit. Paul Glen found other ways to occupy his time in prison, because in February 2007, he married 41-year-old Paula Kelly from Liverpool in a small ceremony at the prison chapel. A month later, no doubt missing his new bride, Glen made an attempt to escape from prison, along with fellow prisoners David Bieber, who killed PCE in Broadhurst in December 2003, and Keith Stewart, The trio aimed to hold guards hostage using a gun that had been smuggled into the prison. Actually, smuggled in by one of the guests at Paul Glen's wedding ceremony. This was orchestrated by Bieber. Their plan was to use hostages to negotiate their way out of prison, where they would be then picked up by a getaway car. Unluckily for them, prison officers caught wind of the plans, and they were all put in solitary confinement before they could carry out their getaway scheme. Paul Glen remains in prison to this day.